Hi, welcome. My name is Jeffrey Kusters. I'm the CTO of ITQ, and I have a very special guest with me here today. Sarah, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks for having me. My name is Sarah. I'm the field CTO for EMEA for HashiCorp, so I cover Benelux and partner with ITQ. And I guess we're here today to talk a little bit about the cloud operating model and how we as HashiCorp see the world, I guess.
I'm really looking forward to this Lightboard, Sarah. And I'm really excited about the partnership that we kicked off this week. So let's get going. What's the cloud operating model? So what are some of the typical challenges that you see at customers, and how does the HashiCorp solutions, how do they fit in?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when we see the world, I guess we kind of see it on two different planes. And when we start, what we see is really we have some devs, and devs' job in life is to deliver the business value. And we see that through really apps and applications. That's the innovation and everything that we see. But then below that, we obviously need to be supporting that. So we have, whether you want to call it an ops team or a platform team, and their job is to provide the infra.
Because that's typically the part that developers couldn't care less about, right? They just want to get their code in production, deliver the application, business functionality. So that's why there's a big
that's generally the idea. There's a lot of risk associated to running your own infrastructure. You have to be on call 24/7. There's a lot of toil and cognitive load, and if you lose one person, your skill set can fall apart. But the problem with infra now, and to your point very much, is that it's becoming really kind of segregated. So you have AWS, you might have Azure, GCP, various flavors of VMware. And then the question becomes, how do you deal with that? And how do you deal with that in a homogeneous manner where you can have a single workflow from top to bottom? Now, on the infrastructure as code side of things, one of the things you might know HashiCorp for is Terraform, right? So we're going to provide that infrastructure as code so that you have that homogeneous workflow all the way down. On the flip side, though, to your point again, devs don't really want to deal with all of the toil that goes with that infrastructure. They want the infrastructure that they want because that gives them some business value behind it. But then the question is, how do we move from what's traditionally kind of known as ITSM and that ticketing system, where you file a ticket, 3 weeks later, maybe you get a VM. You know, I'm from the financial services world. And I think it's 6 months sometimes before we're all the way in production because of all these tickets that we have to file.
A lot of rework, wrong configuration that was required. And
exactly. So the idea then is moving devs and ops into more of a self-service. And that self-service is usually an API of some sort. Now, where we as HashiCorp sit then is really in the middle. And that's because what we want to do is provide that seamless experience for developers so that they can get their applications out and running, and that organizations can have the most productivity possible to continue that innovation in a really seamless manner.
Yeah, makes sense. So self-service, consistency in consuming the infrastructure. I think that those are key elements, right, of the cloud operating model that you briefly discussed.
Yeah, exactly. So then, if we want to click into this a little bit more, the question is, how do you start supporting all of this? And really that boils down to what we consider to be the cloud operating model. And that happens for us on 4 levels. First level is going to be provisioning. And within the HashiCorp stack, most people know Terraform pretty well. I'm just going to abbreviate TF. The other thing that falls into our provisioning stack would be Packer, which is that machine imaging. On top of that, we know that once this is in place, we need to be able to secure all of that. So the question becomes, how do you secure that? We do that with Vault, and more recently released Boundary, which is about a year old now in GA, which is privileged access management. On top of that, once you have all your services running, well, obviously you're going to have to connect them in some capacity. That's done by console. And then on top of that, we're going to have to run all of these things, so all of the applications. And some people know Nomad, which is our scheduler, which is kind of akin to Kubernetes. The idea is to orchestrate and be able to do that at scale. Now, what Nomad does really well, conversely to Kubernetes, is it does that in a simplified manner. So we can run 5,000 nodes with no problem. If I do that in Kubernetes,
You'll have a challenge. Yeah.
I might be crying at the end of the day. And then we also have Waypoint, which is kind of our IDP, so that developers have a single entry point, single pane of glass, and they can enter in and do everything that they need to run this operating model. Now on this side, you might have things like your CI/CD, which sets you up really well to be able to host this cloud operating model, but also things like your artifacts. Then on this side, we want to make sure that this is bound by two things, which first one is going to be policy, so making sure that you have your policy as code, and the other one's going to be observability. Because without these two things, you can't change things you don't know where risks might be.
Yeah, you need visibility, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, that's kind of how we see the world in a very high level view.
Yeah.
And trying to really just make it more cohesive experience for developers, again, so we can get some of that productivity back and really at speed with a little less risk when it comes to things like attrition and skills.
Yeah, makes sense. And if you look at the ops teams, what are some of the benefits there?
For the ops teams, they can have, patterns, and then their job is to produce these patterns for these organizations and for the developers in a way that they're going to be able to support at scale. If you look at Terraform in general, what we start doing is very much, you have Bob, and Bob's job is to create Terraform. So he's just going to plan and apply, and he's going to get his instance. But once we add Alice to the mix, that starts getting a little bit more complicated, because now you have to be able to do this async, which means your state then becomes more of an issue.
Yeah, because Bob can do changes through his infrastructure as code. And if Alice was the name, right?
Alice, yeah.
Let's say that Alice is trying to do another configuration on that same infrastructure resource,
right,
you might have a conflict.
Exactly. You could very easily have a conflict.
Okay.
So then the question is, how do we start scaling that? Because we're not dealing with just Alice and Bob. Organizations I've worked in have 10,000 developers.
Exactly.
So how do you make this available to 10,000 developers? And what I like to think is it becomes a little bit more of a shopping cart as opposed to a loop or a mousetrap. Now we're going to have, Sue and James and everyone. And what they're going to do is they're just going to contribute to these modules and to these patterns.
Yeah.
And the idea of these patterns is, okay, these are the load balancers that we see that are being used, VMs, network. But we can even do things like, Java packaging. Or maybe we have C#, or maybe we're a Python house. It doesn't really matter.
All the building blocks that make an application run in production.
Exactly. So now Sue just has to say, okay, I know my application uses Java and I'm going to need networking and a VM and a load balancer. She just takes her shopping cart, pulls these things off and then is able to make her recipe. Perfect.
Well, this sounds like a very compelling solution to a very, very real problem that we see customers at scale. We see a lot of uptake, of course, in software development within customers. We all know the popular phrases, software is eating the world. So super exciting space to be in, Sarah. I think there's a ton of more questions I could ask and things we could really dive into.
Oh, for sure. There's a ton we can dive into and would love to go into that further with you as well. But to start out, I think this is a good foundation.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Sarah.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Yeah, thank you so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel, hit the like button to like this video. Stay tuned for more videos, especially with Sarah, about diving deep into all the different HashiCorp products and solutions. And see you next time. Thanks.